Hello everybody, in this video I would like to show you a practical example about how the TDD outside-in approach could be in a real life. I will use Elixir, so all the example here will be in Elixir, but I will invite you to try to repeat this code kata with your preferred programming language. So it's not something that is only related to Elixir. So let's get started. The greeting service kata is a code kata intended to practice the TDD outside-in. Hello developer, at the Hello World Inc. company, we are excited to develop and release a new idea into the market. We want to build a new service to send customized greeting messages to our users. Here you find few requirements. The service had to expose an HTTP API, which can be called from other HTTP clients. The service could also be used from a command line or an interactive shell. Try to complete each feature before proceeding to the next one. We like to work iteratively. Okay, so let's try to look at the feature one, just a greeting. When a greeting message is requested, then the system will reply with hello, my friend. Since we are going to start from the following the TDD outside-in approach, the overall idea is to start by writing or describing the feature from the outermost part of our application. In this case, the outermost part of our application could be just an HTTP client that will try to run a request against our application. So let's try to make it. I will start by creating I will call it greeting feature test EXS. Here we go, and I will define a new module, greeting features test. Here we go, and I would like to use exactly the same word used in the text of the exercise to describe this test, this feature, because this is what we want to basically describe. So I will not try to use different words or phrases from the text of the exercise of the problem. So this is exactly what we want to do, what we want to describe. When a greeting message is requested, then the system will reply with hello, my friend. So since we are starting from the outermost part of our application, we imagine to have an HTTP client here. We imagine to really run some HTTP request. So let's try to do it. So for the purpose of the exercise, I will, let's say, eventually at some point, I will start a new server here at this that will listen to the port 4000, and I imagine to call this endpoint greet. Of course, the server is not there yet. That's the point of, TDD, and this is even more, let's say, reinforced from the TDD outside-in approach. And here's some assertion. So I would expect that the status code of the response is 200, and I will expect that the response body will be exactly the message. I would like to make a note here. So the way we are designing this API, this HTTP API, is just for the sake of the exercise itself. Another situation could be that, for example, where we already received some specification about the API we need to implement, and in that case, the API is already enforced, let's say, by the specification. So in this case, in the case where we are doing this exercise right now, we have no strict specification about how the HTTP API have to looks like. So we are going to use, let's say, to simplify it, just we are not going to use any kind of JSON specification or any kind of other standard. So the idea here is just to keep the exercise as simple as possible. In this case, we designed the HTTP API, and it's simple. We imagine that we have this greet endpoint, and what we expect to receive is 200 as status code, and the response body will contain the phrase, "Hello, my friend." So to make it real, basically here, we have to start also the application. Because since we are starting from the outermost part, so we cannot assume that the application is already started and running a server that is listening to this port. We need to start the application to make it explicit. And let's see what happens if we try to start it. Here we go. So as expected, right? Since there is no web server still listening to this port, and of course there is no endpoint available, there is no greet endpoint available yet, what we are receiving is a connection refused. That is good. That is really good. Is our first feedback that we get. So the next move that I would like to do is to try to understand how to start a web server. So for doing that, I'm going to use plug that probably you already know if you are coming from Elixir. So I will define a plug that will use the Cowboy server, and the plug is called greeting web, and the server will be listening at port 4000. So the next step is that we have to do is to define the plug. So let's creating it. Greeting web ex. Here we go. Let's save it. Yes, this will be our greeting web. And we, for now, what we can do, since our mission here is just to being able to spawn, to create, to start a web server that listen to the port 4000, and that server that is able to handle the request. So for this purpose, what I did here is just to create a simple plug router with a catch-all endpoint that will respond 404. The endpoint does not exist. Okay, let's try to run the test again and see what happens. Great, now we are receiving a different feedback. We can read this feedback in a different way, so we can provide a different interpretation for the feedback that we receive right now. So the previous feedback was connection refused. Why? Because the server was not there. Now we are receiving a 404. This means that someone is listening to that port and is able to handle the request and in a manner that we receive 404. So the next step is to try to change this 404 to something that is closer to the result that we expect, 200. And of course, we expect to receive the phrase, the sentence, "Hello, my friend." So in order to make this, instead of going and change the implementation of the plug router of the greeting web, I would like to write a test for the greeting web for this plug router and document from the perspective of the greeting web router the behavior that we expect to see to happen. So let's try to do it. So we have greeting web test exs. Here we go. Let's create a test. The focus of this test, the object that this test is going to describe, is the plug itself, is the web component of our application. So it will be the greeting web test. And let's see how to write a test for the plug. Here we go. Here we go. So we can remove this. Okay, here what we are saying is that, so this is just a placeholder, so we need to describe the behavior we want to see to happen here, accordingly to the feature that we want to to implement. So the thing that I expect to find here is that the endpoint, let's see, describe, for example, get where on the grid, because here we want to document the behavior of a specific endpoint when a specific resource or endpoint when it is called with a specific HTTP verb or method. So let's see, test, respond, or maybe return, hello my friend. How to make the request? We can use this code snippet here. Maybe we need to indent. Maybe, is it correct? No, now it's correct. And of course, the router is creating web. Here we go. Is a get. The endpoint that we want to call is greet. And what we expect to receive 200 and hello my friend. Here we go. Let's see. We are still in a red bar, but at some point we can even make some consideration about this test and, let's say, the readability of the test itself. So let's try to run now this test, all the test suite, and see what happened. Okay, cool. What we can see here is that, of course, we are still in a red bar, it's still red. Now the next step is to try to provide the, let's say, the simplest implementation possible that can help us to make this test pass. So the simple action that can help us to make this test pass, it should be just the simplest thing. We don't care about the sign thing or implementation detail, just the simplest thing. So if I had to think at the simple thing, it could be just a fake, just the simplest implementation possible could be this thing. So greet, and here just the phrase hello my friend. Let's see. And we are in a green bar. So since we are in a green bar, one thing that I would like to do is just to commit this. And this could be return greet endpoints will respond with hello my friend, and we can push the changes. Here we go, done. So let's try to look at this. Right now, this test is quite, I'm quite comfortable with this test. So what we did was just to describe the endpoint greet. And we say that we expect that this endpoint will return hello my friend when we call it with a get request. That's fine. Let's take a look here. So probably one thing that we can do is to barely remove this mesh. We don't care about it anymore. Let's see. We should still green. Here we go. Let's comment this. Can show endpoint. And let's push. Okay, let's go back here and let's try to reason a little bit about the requirements that we had to fulfill in order to be sure that we can move to the next feature. One requirement that still is not, let's say, satisfied is this. The service can also be used from a command line or an interactive shell. So what we have asked here is that we need to find a way to make the service be usable from a command line or an interactive shell. The point here is that the only way to consume this service is through an HTTP endpoint. One thing that we can do is, for example, to try to extract the logic behind this handler, this HTTP handler, that makes possible to return this hello my friend. So probably here we should find a way to extract the logic that is responsible to return hello my friend. So one thing that I would like to do here is to try to extract this responsibility, the responsibility that to return this phrase out from the greeting web module. So for example, let's try to extract it in yes, let's try to extract this function here, and if we run the test, everything should be still in green. Great. The next step that we can do is to move this into another module. In order to make this, let's try to do it here in the same module first. I don't want to extract a module right now, so dev module, we can call it greeting, and we can move this function within that module. And here, of course, we should change the reference because now the function is part of this module greeting. Let's see. Cool. The second step would be to just try to extract this module somewhere, like for example here. Dev module, or maybe we can just copy and paste. Here we go. Cut and paste. Yeah, it's better. Okay, here we go. That's much better. But one thing that we are still missing is, let's say, where are the tests for this module here? Let's do it. Module test, greeting. Here, one thing that we can describe is probably the greet function. Return hello my friend. Assert greeting read is equal to hello my friend. Let's see. Cool. And at this point, probably we are able to call this function using the command line of our application. So now this is the console, the Elixir console. So, sorry, we should be able to call it. Great, great. So let's try to commit this change. And what we can say here is that we have extract the greeting module. Okay, before moving to the next, let's move it here. Before moving to the next feature, one thing that I would like to see is the differences between the greeting test and the greeting web test. Because if we look at what this test and this test are trying to describe, basically they are describing the same thing, the same behavior. Here we are indirectly testing the behavior of the greeting module through the HTTP test. There is a sort of duplication, let's say, of concern. We have two tests that are testing exactly the same thing from two different perspectives. The one is from the HTTP and the second is from the module itself. For now, I will not change anything here, but this is something that I would like to remember to keep in mind as a sort of refactoring step. But probably this is something that can emerge later. So let's try to move on to the feature 2. The feature 2 says greeting a user with a customized message. So basically, when a user with the name Joe requests a greeting message, then the system will reply with a customized message that says, hello, Joe. Okay, so in this case, the previous feature was just about a greeting. So there was no logic, there was no customized greeting message, because this is the the point of this service. It seems that the point of this service is to send out a customized greeting message to our users. So the first feature was just the simplest one. Now it appears the customized thing. Okay, so as we did before, I would like to start from this acceptance criteria. I will, let's say, try to get help from what the system, from the requirement itself, in order to write the next test. And as always, I will start from the most external part from the outermost part of our application. So here we go. We can say describe when a user with the name Joe requests a greeting message, what happened? Then the system will reply with probably we can shorten it with hello Joe. There we go. So as we did before, so we should start the application. I will copy everything here for now. We should start the application. Then we should run an HTTP request. So as we did before, here there is no API specification that we have to follow. We can keep everything as simple as possible. One thing that I imagine here is to introduce a query parameter here, which we can use to provide the name for the customized message. And what we expect to receive is hello Joe. So let's see what happens if we run this test. Okay, this is exactly what we was expecting. So there is no feature still there. There is no implementation. But as always, we start from the outermost part of our application. We start from trying to describe the feature that we want to see from the outermost part. So next step is to try to write a test here for the greeting web module. And I will copy this test with a change that's like this. For example, a name. One thing that I like to do is to go from the specific here, as you see, because here we use the term Joe, because this is something that comes from the requirements. We need to use any kind of term that can be easily associated to a real world example. So here probably it's better, in my opinion, to keep a language that is closer to the domain. So not using terms like a name, any name, or XXX, or 1 or 2, or magic numbers, stuff like that. Just stick with the real world. In this case, instead, since we are moving to an internal component of our application, it's not something that we can use to describe any kind of business logic. So it could be useful to keep generic name, because here the behavior that we want to describe is what happened when we submit a query parameter name with a string, with a name, with any kind of value there. And here we can say return hello a name. Let's do greet name a name. What happened here is hello a name. Okay, let's see what happened if we run this test. Where is it? Here we go. Is this one? It is failing. So now we have a mission that is exactly the same we did before. We need to find out what is the simplest move possible that will allow us to make this test pass. In this case, what I imagine is just to go straight, read the query parameters from plug. So basically here, if we open the module. So I imagine that we should find out a way to read the query parameter. That could be, params. Here we go. And then we need to find a way to perform the logic. The simplest possible logic here could be, if we have a params name, we should reply with hello and the name itself. Otherwise, we fall back to the previous one. So let's try to do that. So what happens if we do something like params? I don't remember if this is the right way. Let's try. So if we have nil, this means that the query parameter was not provided. So we can fall back to the previous. Otherwise, if we have a name, we should respond with hello name exclamation mark. Okay, let's see what happened. Great, we are green, and this was, let's say, the simplest, let's say, move in order to make the test pass. So I would like to commit this change. Return customized greeting message for a user. Here we go. Still, if we look at the requirements here, we are still missing this requirement. The service can also be used from a command line or an interactive shell. And we know that we have some logic, some business logic that is part of the HTTP module, of the web module. So we should find a way to extract this feature, to move this feature within the greeting module. So in order to do that, one thing that we can try to do is to move this, is to extract this in a function that can be greet with name. There we go. Let's see what happened. Green. Yeah, probably we get this error because of it was in the acceptance test. Yeah, probably because of this. Yeah, another step that we can do is to try to extract then this duplication in a setup. This is something that we can do later. Where were we? So here we go. So the next step could be to move these directly into the greeting module. Let's see. Something like this. Still green, but still we have this this conditional here. So the thing that I'm expecting here is that whatever the name is, it's a concern of the greet function, the greeting module, to understand what is the message that we have to return. So instead of using the case here, what happens if we just remove this case at all? Let's try to extract this first. Or let's see what happened. Oops. Just remove everything. And put it here. What will happen? Okay, it's failing because this feature is not available. So we are calling basically the greet, this with a nil, and it will return hello nil. So let's go back to a green bar. Okay, probably now it's much better, but now we know what we want to do. I would like to have a version of the greet function that is able to accept nil, and if the greet function receives nil, we want to return hello my friend. We want to fall back to the previous to the default message, and eventually we are going to deprecate this. So now that we know what we want to achieve, let's try to write a test for that. So the first thing that I would like to describe here is the first feature, let's say this, the common, that will return hello with a specific name, with the name is given. So when a name is given, return a customized message for that name. So assert greeting, greet a name, oops, hello, a name. Here we go. We should be green, of course, because this is a feature that was already there. But what about the next one? So we want to describe that when a name is not given, it will return the default message. When a name is not given, it will return the default message. When the name is nil, this should be hello my friend. Let's see what happened. Okay, now we are in a red bar, and we are allowed to change the actual implementation of our module. Probably the simplest thing that we can do is to provide a function signature that will match nil and that will return the default message. Let's see. Great. At this point, we know that this is something that we don't need, but how to delete it? So in the web module, we are still using the old one. One thing that usually I do is to delete the function that I believe will be replaced or will be not used anymore. Rerun all the test suites, see where the tests are going to break, and fix them. And of course, even the implementation. But right now we know that this function should be replaced by this. So let's try to remove it, rerun the whole test suite. Let's see where we are breaking. Oh, probably this is a flaky test. Okay, here we go. As you see, we have basically several tests. The first is in the greeting web test, the module, undefined function, greet. So let's go in the greeting web here. So we should use nil here. Let's rerun the test suite. And here we go. The next error that we have here is in the greeting test. Let's go in the greeting test. Here we go. So this is an outdated, deprecated, not needed anymore test. So the thing that we can do here is just to remove it and run the test suite again. And here we go. Now we are green. Let's take a look at the greeting test. Okay, we have now a clear two different behavior that we want to describe for the greeting module. The first is when a name is given. The second is when a name is not given. From the point of view of the implementation here is quite, I don't think that there is something that we can do here. It's quite enough. From the greeting web, as you can see here, probably we have some duplication. So we can probably duplication in code, because the thing that we can do is to replace this case with just one line. So we just inline this parent's name here, and we can remove all this case probably. Let's try it. So here, and we can remove everything else. Here we go, we are green, and probably now is a good moment to commit all our changes. So what we did now was to being able to return a customized greeting message from the console. Use the console to now return a customized greeting message from the console. Let's see if it's true. Greeting, greet, nothing. Hello, my friend. Joe, hello, Joe. Cool, and we can push. We can assume that our feature is now complete. You have feature 1, feature 2. We are able to return a customized message. But now, before moving to the feature 3 and I would like to take a look to the greeting web test, because I remember this is something that we noticed before, is that these tests are basically describing the same functionality, the same behavior of the greeting test. So, but from a different perspective, from a different point of view. But here, the object under test is the greeting web. So the mission of this test suite is to describe the behavior of the greeting web. And if we open the greeting web implementation, it's not about describing the business logic, that basically is about describing the behavior of the greeting module, but rather than is more about describing the collaboration between the web and the greeting module. So if I open the greeting web test, what I'm expecting here is not to describe the business logic. Instead, I'm expecting to see the collaboration between the greeting web and its collaborator, that is greeting. So how to describe it, how to change this test in order to describe the collaboration between the web part, the greeting. Let's see. If we do a get greet, what we expect is to get greet will call greeting with the nil. We'll call the greeting module with a nil name, with a nil as name. Get greet will call the greeting module with a nil as the name. Let's see. So how to document that? In order to being able to document this thing, we should be able to use an object that can, let's say, validate this, that we are calling a greeting module. We'll call a greeting module with nil as name, with the name with nil value. We'll call a greeting module with the value nil for the name. So the thing here is that we should find a way to inject a collaborator that can be used to validate what we are expecting here. So we need a sort of spy, or we need a module that is able to validate this. Let's see. Def module fake greeting 2. We can say def greet nil, do call with nil, and we need to find a way to inject this here. So greeting fake greeting, and here this is called with, and we should do basically, or if we don't want to change everything here, it's better, because otherwise if we change how the web module is initialized here, we are going to break probably all other tests. So for this purpose, just leave it in this way. Instead, initialize it here. And here we can say greeting, fake greeting. And what we expect is to have called with nil here. Okay, let's try to run this test. Okay, as you see, it's not working just because it's still red, because if we open the greeting web part, we are not able to use the injected collaborator. We are not able to use a different collaborator than the greeting. So we need to find a way to extract this to being able to inject it. So in order to do that, we can, let's say, use the builder ops available for plug to get the options here. We don't want to break things. So let's see how we can do that. So we can say greeting, because I don't want to break this. So one thing that we can do is case ops. The name of the module is greeting. So if we have nil, we are going to use, for example, the greeting, the default one. Otherwise, we are going to use the greeting module. And let's see. Here we go, we are green. That's good. So let's try to see what we did here. So basically now here, we are just describing that a collaboration will happen between the web part, a collaborator greeting. So this is the purpose of having this greeting web module. It's a sort of, it's something in the middle between the HTTP request and the real domain business logic that we want to call. And this is what we want to describe here. So next thing here is that probably at this point we can remove it. This is not needed because this is about business logic and the business logic is already described in its own test. The next step is just to remove it. We need to proceed and try to document the behavior, the collaboration between the greeting web and the greeting module when a name is provided. It's not about returning hello a name, but I will use the same here. We'll call a greeting module with the value a name for the name. And we can use this fake just to prove that we was able to call it with a name. Call with nil, hello, call with a name. Let's see, call with a name. Here we go. Oh, sorry. I need to change this. Name. Let's see what happened. It should be green. Here we go. Because we provided the implementation here. What happened if we comment out this? It should be red. And if red, this means that the collaboration is not happen. Here we go. This is just to prove that the greet is called with exactly a name and will return call with name. Just to prove that the collaboration between the web and the module greeting is in place and it is working as expected. The next step here is that we can remove this now. Here's the business logic, is already tested here. And maybe the next thing is that we can, at this point, replace this thing with oops, here we go, and oops. Here we go. So we need to copy this. We need to replace this with ops. There we go. And then we can inject the fake here. Here we go. Let's see what happened. And we are green. Cool. Okay, now here, the purpose of this greeting web test is just to verify that we have the proper collaboration between the web and its collaborator, greet. So when we call greet without any name, it will call the greeting module with the value nil for the name. When we call get greet with the name as query parameter, it will call the greeting module with the value and name for the name. So probably we can find a better description here, but this is what we want to describe. The purpose of this test is to describe the collaboration, how the web and the downstream module, that is the greeting, collaborate. But what happened here now? Is there something that we can change? Because I remember that we did this to make sure that we are not going to break anything. But what happened if we want to inject the greeting module as a default? I mean, this seems to be, to me, a sort of configuration things that should not be part of the greeting web. I'm expecting that we are going to inject the default at the moment when we start the application. So let's see how we can change here the application. We should find a way to inject this collaborator here. So if I remember, we can do something like that. It's greeting web with the collaborator greeting. That will be greeting. Let's see what happened. Nothing, probably. Here we go. Nice. But now we need to find a way to use this greeting. Here we go. And a way could be just to go here. And now we should have this, because this greeting will be passed as a keyword list here when we initialize the plug. So this means that maybe we can inline this here and we can remove all this conditional. So basically what we did is to pull up the configuration concern at the moment when we build the application. And great, we are green. So let's try to commit this change. So what we did is to document, maybe what we did was a refactoring step. We changed basically what we are going to document through the greeting web test. So greeting web test are now describing do not describe the main logic in the web test, for example. Let's push our changes. Here we go. Let's run the test again. Yeah, probably there was something more that we can do here is to remove this duplication. Maybe in a setup too. Let's see. Here I should return okay. Here we go. Nice. Let's see what we did. I can remove. Here we go. Hey, there we go. Why is not okay? And this is the change. Basically, just extract the application start in the setup phase. Here we go. Let's see what happened now in the feature 3. Feature 3 says greeting a user by choosing a random greeting message from a set of messages. This is quite more interesting. So it seems that the greeting message had to be chosen from a list of predefined messages. That's cool. So I would like to end the session here because the purpose of this video was to show you how you can follow the TDD Outside-In approach in a real life application using Elixir. Before closing the video, I would like to, let's say, do a little brief session to provide you a recap of what we did. So, when you start to try to approach the development of your application, starting from following the TDD Outside-In approach, you need to remember that you are describing, you want to start to describe your application from the outermost part. So what we did when we start this exercise was to start by writing the test from the outermost part of our application without writing any lines of code needed to support this feature, the test. So there was no server, there was no defined and specific way to set up and start the application. We just went and write down the first test from the outermost part of our application, trying to run real HTTP requests against a server, against a specific endpoint. Another thing that we did was to try to understand what is the real purpose of the module, of the object that we are testing, in order to avoid to have duplicated tests in terms of what they are describing. One example was the greeting web module test, where we were actually describing the same logic of the greeting module, but from a different point of view, from a different perspective. That was the web part. But there, the problem was that we have duplicated basically the test. So what we did instead was to refactor the test and refactor also the way the greeting web behave in order to describe the proper behavior. So we discovered that the purpose of the greeting web is just to being able to handle a web request and eventually a query parameter, and to call its collaborator regardingly based on the parameter that we read. This is the real purpose of this greeting web module. In order to do that, to describe this, to prove that the collaboration is in place, we had to introduce an object, a module that can be used for this purpose. So in this case, what we did was to extract a module that we called fake greeting. We used to inject it in the greeting web, and we basically provide this implementation for the purpose to prove that the collaboration is in place. So basically here we are saying that when the greet is called with no query params, the greeting module is called with nil. And for here we say that when the greeting is called with a query param, we will call the greeting with its query param. One thing that you can do if you want to continue to practice on this technique is to try to replace this fake greeting module with a mock object. There are two libraries out there that you can use. It's mock is a library called mock for Elixir, and another library called mocks for Elixir. I would invite you to try both and try to reason about when could be useful to use one and when instead to use the other. That could be a further exercise that you can do. So another thing that we saw during this screencast or during this demonstration is that even the tests that we write to support our development are subject to refactor. So the refactoring phase is not only something that we should apply to the code, to the application code, but also to the test itself. And we did it at least 3 times. The last time was here. We just refactor something here in the features test. For example, just extracting the start of the application as part of the setup. The second, and I will say big refactoring, was here in the greeting web test, because basically we rewrote the test to explain better their purpose. And also we refactored, we changed the greeting test. So let's see if everything is pushed. Yes. So say that I will invite you to try to continue from this point, because you will find all the code available on GitHub, and you will find all the reference as part of the description of this video. So feel free to try to continue to try to implement the feature 3, and then try to spend a few minutes to have this retrospective moment with yourself. And another thing that I would suggest you to do is to try to, as soon as you finish the feature 3, try to do the exercise it again from the beginning, and try then to proceed with the feature 4. And of course, just to spend a few minutes to find some answer to this question, to have some retrospective moment with yourself, to understand, to think something about the design of your application and reflect about what you did. So for now, I will say that we are done. I hope that this video, that you enjoyed this video. So feel free to leave your comments down below here in this video. And of course, try this code kata in whatever programming language you want. And bye bye.